Hello, this is Rich Voynich. I'm a master gardener at Wake County. This is another series of our Ready Garden Grow Introduction to Vegetable Gardening. This topic, we're going to talk about managing common problems, and we'll talk about different types of things that you're going to see in the garden and vegetable gardening regarding problems and how to deal with them. A little bit about Master Gardeners, if you hadn't heard information about us. We are volunteers with NC State Extension. We provide research-based information for anything associated with agriculture, gardens, lawns, and landscapes. We do have a Facebook page that you can follow for local gardening information and are available Monday through Friday, either via phone or via email, and sometimes available via in person during non-COVID times. So please feel free to reach out to us. We do lots of other things out in the community when possible, including Ask Master Gardener booths and other information regarding things. We have demonstration gardens at the State Fair as well as Lake Crabtree. So feel free to reach out to us anytime for any types of questions, either on this topic or other topics associated with horticulture. Part of the Ready Garden Go vegetable garden series, this is going to be covering managing problems. There are other core classes and additional topics on Ready Garden Grow vegetable gardening that you can reach and are available online. In this particular class, we're going to talk about the basics of organic gardening and how to deal with problems in an organic type of way. We're going to also talk about a methodology for managing problems called Integrated Pest Management, also known as IPM. And we're going to talk about managing common problems that most people see in our area, including weeds, watering, pests, and diseases. So starting with organic gardening principles, really the purpose of organic gardening is primarily to build, the number one focus is to build healthy soil. As much as you can create a strong soil and a base for your plants, the stronger the plants will be. The less chemicals you'll need to use, the less controls that you'll need to use. So really developing this nutrient reservoir in the soil or building a base for the soil, it helps, not rely on fertilizers in terms of applications. Things that are really important are for building that soil include organic matter, so things like compost and other organic materials, having the proper pH, having a good fertility in the soil, and having a diverse microbial population or microbes and things that are in the soil that are helping break down and diversify the soil. Most organic gardening is really a common sense approach, and particularly when dealing with pest management. And how do you deal with those types of pests in a knowledge-based and common sense approach? Also, organic gardening focuses on sparingly using fertilizers and pest controls when you need to. Organic officially comes from, in a commercial space, from the OMRI, which is the Organic Materials Review Institute. It's specific products that commercial growers use to be defined as organic. Homeowners do not have access to most of those products. Organic means that they are coming from naturally occurring sources. It doesn't mean no chemicals. Organic can use organic chemicals, organic controls, and they are, but they are not necessarily a no chemical. Organic does also not mean vegetarian, because there are in many cases organic controls such as blood meal, bone meal, that are based and derived from animals, not necessarily all vegetarian or vegan. Organic also does not require use of organic seeds to be certified as organic. And homeowners can't, and community gardens and other things cannot be certified. Only commercial companies can be certified through organic. Just keep in mind that also that too much of anything can be a problem. Too much compost can potentially impact the pH and other nutrient levels like phosphorus. And some natural products can be poisonous also. So you should certainly follow manufacturers' directions anytime using any products, whether they're organic or non-organic. Managing pests in a garden is really one of the things that we're going to talk about today. But what is a pest? It really is anything that's not necessarily what you want in a garden. This is an example of a dog taking a cucumber. The dog is considered in this case a pest because he's taking some produce from the garden that maybe he shouldn't. Any other things can be also pests, children that come stomping through your garden. But pests are a natural part of the system. And not all pests are, or not all things like insects are bad. So we'll talk a little bit about how to control these and methodologies to control and manage the pests in your garden. One of the methodologies includes integrated pest management, an IPM, and it's really a continual process that makes use of knowledge about the various pests or issues in your garden, how to identify them and how to define a threshold for them, how to provide some type of implementation of a control or a treatment, and then evaluate whether that is successful or not. It is a continual monitoring process and things that you should do if you're following an IPM methodology continually in your garden. It tries to use non-chemical methods and considers particularly thresholds, and we'll talk a little bit about each one of these sections as we move forward. So monitoring your pests, the garden for pests. As we talked about, a pest is anything in the garden that really is not supposed to be there. So do you go to your garden? You should look for signs of damage and signs of changes in your garden and visit your garden frequently. Depending on the size and your capability, you could visit it daily, weekly. But the more you visit, the more you monitor your garden, the better it will be in terms of understanding how your garden is growing and changes and pests that are in the garden. Many problems can appear overnight. I've had cases where my plants, say this time, fall time of year, cabbages and things are doing well, and then overnight, all of a sudden, I have cabbage worms on there. Sometimes they can be overnight, sometimes they can take a longer time to show up. And be aware of what's happening in and around your garden and your yard and in the environment. So if your plants look all wilted and it's been really hot, then that's an idea of a potential problem, an environmental related problem, pest, that could be impacting your garden. But keep an idea and get out there and look at your garden and watch what's happening. So identifying pests. When you are out there looking in your garden and doing your observations, look for various clues. Take pictures. What's happening in the garden? Are the leaves changing color? Is one part of the plant being damaged or impacted, or is the entire plant? Are there holes? Are the holes round or are they rough? Do the fruit look rotten? Are there spots on the fruit? What color? How big are they? Where are those spots located? Can you see insects? A lot of times, one of the common problems, we'll talk a little bit about that, tomato hornworms, as a very easy sign to see the leaves stripped from a plant. Can you find that tomato hornworm? They're very difficult sometimes to find, but if you see that telltale sign, if you observe that, then you can identify that and try to find that tomato hornworm. Note the size of the various insects. Take pictures of them. Identify kind of what plant is in trouble and where these insects are hanging out. The third part of IPM is threshold, and it's really an important part. It's an acknowledgement that if you are trying to follow an IPM, an organic method of growing, that there will be some damage to your plants. They won't necessarily be as pristine as one that uses a lot of different chemicals. So as you minimize that, you have to understand that not all of your plants will be all perfect. Create a threshold. Define how much damage am I willing to accept for, in this case, parsley. with a worm that's eating my parsley, how much damage am I willing to take? How much am I willing to give to nature or to this pest? How much disease am I willing to have on a plant before I have to try to do something? Will it sacrifice the crop? Will it damage the crop? Will it impact my yield? Not every problem needs to have a solution, but if you consider these thresholds, it allows you to define how much you will accept in terms of damage before you need to do something. And the thresholds also can vary, so they don't have to be fixed. It can be, I'm willing to accept some damage before I do my first control. I'm willing to accept a little more damage, but I have to do a stronger control before I sacrifice the entire plant. So once you have these thresholds, and if you're monitoring and you see that some of these thresholds are being reached, my plant is getting really eaten up by cabbage worms, or I really see a problem with a tomato hornworm eating my plant, then we have to do something. And that is doing a treatment, doing something to affect it, and then evaluating how well that treatment works. So implementing a control and evaluating how that control works. In IPM, there are really 4 categories of controls or treatments. There are cultural, mechanical, biological, chemical. And then when you implement that control, you evaluate how effective it is, and then go back to the cycle of monitoring, identifying, seeing if that control affected the change that you wanted to implement. Keeping a garden journal is a great idea and a way to manage that effectiveness of your particular treatment. So in terms of cultural practices, keeping the plants healthy and strong minimizes the stress on a plant, and it develops healthy, fertile soil, and manages to keep those plants much stronger and healthier regarding the way that they're growing. And that minimizes the amount of chemicals and the controls that you have to implement. So use proper plant varieties, have good soil, follow planting practices. So put the plant in the right location at the right time and rotate your crops. Also do good garden sanitation. So at the end of a growing season or part, get rid of the debris, destroy weeds and diseased plants, do not compost them. Prevention is the best way of defending against problems. Mechanical controls is another one of the controls. You can do things like hand pick, scrape eggs off of a leaf, use traps like in this case, a beer trap for slugs that might be coming into the garden. Row covers are a great way. It provides a physical barrier for insects not to be able to get to plants. It's one of the ways that we use to help control squash vine borers, is to put a row cover over the plants to keep the squash vine moth from getting into the soil to plant its eggs. You can use things like water. A spray of water is a good way to wash off pests from a particular plant. A lot of insects can't deal with a high spray of water. You can use reflective items. You can use scented items. Those may scare off birds and different types of animals and deer. Biological controls are biological methods, either using predators, parasites, or pathogens that occur in nature. Ladybird beetles or ladybugs are one ways of doing it. Those are biological controls. They eat a lot of different insects. Praying mantis, the same thing. Parasitic wasps. And a bacteria, Bacillus thuringiensis, is another way of using a biological control that helps minimize, or as one of the controls to help control problems and pests that you have in a garden. Again, you should use the minimum use of pesticides because they also potentially can kill beneficial insects. So be careful using any types of controls and understand what the impact could be to the beneficial side. Finally, chemical controls. Chemicals are chemicals, and they can be toxins, whether they are natural, organic, or synthetic. So try natural remedies first. So try organic methods first, and use a non-organic and other controls as kind of the last resort. Understand that chemicals are labeled for pest and the host. So not all types of chemicals will kill everything. And in many cases, chemicals can kill good things, as I mentioned before. You can spray chemicals and kill a lot of bad insects, but you can kill some of your good insects like bees and other pollinators at the same time. In terms of chemicals, you have herbicides that kill weeds, insecticides that kill insects, fungicides, and antibiotics that deal with a disease perspective. Always follow the manufacturer's directions in terms of the amount and application and timing and where you're supposed to do it. Some chemicals are not suitable for vegetable gardens and gardens, so be careful about what you're using. Read the labels on those boxes and containers and follow those directions when you're applying it. Organic controls, some of the organic controls that are common that are available: insecticidal soap, neem oil, perethrins, and spinosad, BT, Bacillus thuringiensis. Diatomaceous earth is an organic control. It's a crushed up diatoms or shells that make a physical barrier and cause insects that may rub against it to have a problem. They get cut up like slugs running across it. So again, these are all some of the organic controls, and just be careful and read the manufacturer's directions for them and how you should apply them for those types of use. What's a weed? A wild plant growing where it's not wanted, and it competes with cultivated plants. Mechanical use removal of weeds is the easiest way or the best way, and you should have a philosophy of let no weed go to seed. It's just a way of managing how to control some of your weeds. There are obviously ways. Sometimes mechanical approach is not always the easiest. It's certainly a way, but you can also potentially use, again, depending on your threshold, how many weeds are you willing to accept in your garden, then you may have to apply some control for that. Mulch is a great way of controlling weeds. It helps retain moisture in the soil and keeps your soil a little bit cooler, particularly in hot North Carolina. One way of applying mulch is a 2 to 4 inch layer over damp soil and established plants. Use organic mulches, including compost and shredded leaves, bark chips, and newspaper. Do be aware that in some cases, mulches may have herbicides in it. We've seen some wheat straw and other types of straw that are used in mulch, and grass clippings may have chemical in it that could potentially damage or distort plants. And we'll talk about that in just a second. In fact, here's an example of herbicide carryover. On the very left-hand side, we've got a healthy tomato plant that looks strong and good fruit, not diseased. In the middle, you've got a tomato plant that's got herbicide damage. It's usually twisted and distorted. The flowers may be distorted and misshapen. A lot of times there's a large curling of the leaves. These are examples of herbicide damage that we've seen a lot here in the Wake County area in North Carolina. Very simple herbicide test. So one of the questions we get is, well, I think I have damage from a herbicide, either a spray over, somebody sprayed Roundup and it was a windy day and it sprayed onto my garden, or I used some wheat straw that we thought was contaminated. A simple herbicide soil test. Plant in a set of soil that you have some question on, some of the same seeds. In this case, it's a bean seeds. This picture on the left-hand side are ones that are good, healthy, known soil, say from a potted soil bag. The other is the soil that you have a question on. You'll see that those plants are stunted. They're a little bit more twisted, a little bit different in terms of the control growth of them. And so you can see that that is likely the damaged soil. Watering is definitely another issue in the garden in terms of a control and a problem that can there. If you underwater, plants use water to pull nutrients that they need out of the soil, and it's part of their photosynthesis process. You will see slower growth. You may see wilting plants, dead leaves, dry soil on the surface. You can water, and if the plant doesn't recover, a lot of times plants they'll go through a natural wilting process when it runs low on water. If the plant doesn't recover, it could be some other problem. But just as much underwatering, overwatering can be a problem because it floods the plant. We've seen this in places where we've had hurricane flooding and damage and flooding from rain, extensive rain. Plants can get deprived of oxygen from the roots. It damages those roots and opens up the plant for more diseases. And you will see wilted leaves, yellow growth, and slow growth also similar to underwatering. Frequent shallow watering is also a problem. We recommend that you water more deeply for a longer period of time when you're watering. So overwatering can be almost as bad as underwatering. In terms of watering practices, provide 1 inch of water per week. If you don't have a rain gauge or you're not looking at rain, and that water should be from 6 to 12 inches. We should, as much as possible, do longer watering and less shallow watering. The longer watering encourages deeper roots, and a deeper plant makes the plant stronger and makes the plant more healthier. And it doesn't also cause the plant just to keep its roots at the top of the soil, which could dry out and cause problems in wilting of the plant. Drip irrigation system is one of the most efficient ways of watering. Can be set for automated and timers so that it can although do that and also have tied in with water sensors. We prefer to water from a early morning or late afternoon perspective. It's the most efficient in terms of getting as much water onto the plant as possible. And you may have to adjust your watering. There'll be dry periods during the summertime and even dry periods during the wintertime. You may need to water your plants even if you're growing winter crops, where there's dry periods where the plants will need to have some water. You can also use mulch, as we alluded to help retain some more moisture in that soil. When you look at fertilizing during the growing season, obviously, there's dealing with fertilization and when you're planting, but there may be times during the growing season that you may need some extra nitrogen, and those include plants that are usually high nitrogen feeders like peppers and squash and corn, also cabbages. Those plants tend to like to have a little more fertilization, a little more nitrogen in them while they're growing. You can apply them via side dressing. You don't have to want to provide nitrogen to all plants, and you need to have a balance and know which plants require nitrogen and not. For example, tomatoes, you don't want to give extra nitrogen while you're trying to get them to flower and to set fruit, because it's going to promote leaf growth versus fruit production. So just keep in mind that fertilization should be done at the appropriate times during the season, not always. In terms of insects control, 90% of insects are beneficial. These are just some examples here. Ladybird beetles, spotted ladybird beetle, bees, praying mantises are great. These are all examples of beneficial insects that can be damaged if you use the wrong control, the wrong insecticide or chemical, and it can affect these good insects as well as the bad insects. So going on to common pest problems, let's talk about some of the bigger ones that we've got here in the center part of North Carolina. Already alluded to tomato hornworm. This is a great example of tomato hornworm. They tend to attack things like eggplants, peppers, tomatoes, all in the nightshade family. Those types of plants, it's its favorite. Look for stripped leaves starting at the top of the plant or around the plant. You'll see bare stalks available. That's a pretty good sign on your tomato plant that you got a tomato hornworm. These little larvae that are on the back of the plant, or back of the tomato hornworm, are actually the larvae of a beneficial parasitic wasp that actually the larvae have eaten through that. They were planted inside the tomato hornworm and are eating their way out. You want to keep those larvae and let them mature. That tomato hornworm is pretty much finished up. He's not going to be eating a whole lot more. The larvae would have pretty much killed him. And those beneficial wasps will then populate and attack and help control more tomato hornworms. It's nature's way of naturally controlling the tomato hornworm population. Squash vine borer is another one on the right-hand side here. You'll have a beautiful squash plant, and then the next day, all of a sudden, it'll be wilted. Look for holes at the base of the plant. You'll see a yellow brownish frac that's on the bottom from the squash vine borer. They overwinter in the soil, and eggs are laid in the soil, and they come up through the vine. At this point, there is no known control. Our recommendations, if you have squash vine borer problems in your soil, is rotate, plant early, plant in succession. So I think there is a discussion about succession planting in one of our other Ready Garden Grow series. Plant squashes at various times during the year. And put row covers on over these squashes before they bloom to help eliminate the squash vine borer planting its eggs in the soil and infecting the plant. You will have to remove those covers once the squashes start to blooming, otherwise the flowers will not get pollinated. And obviously rotate your crops. Other common insects include squash bugs, aphids. Squash bugs you'll see in this picture also shows some of the eggs. They print their kind of brownish yellow eggs underneath. You can remove those eggs and scrape them off pretty easily with a finger. Remove dead debris, hand pick and squish the nymphs and adults are ways of controlling that. Squash bugs and aphids tend to not necessarily kill the plant. They're a pest. In some cases, again, as you're doing IPM, when you reach a threshold, you may need to take some kind of action. Aphids are sucking insects, and they will affect the leaves. They also overwinter and they'll hatch in the spring. They rarely kill the plant. You can use water sprays, insecticidal soap, or neem oil to control aphids if you run into a serious aphid problem. So insect pests, we talked a little about. IPM is one of the best methodologies in the defense. Controls, we talked about how you can plant in the environment the correct types of plants, hand picking, physical barriers, and when you need to, using insecticides to control. Also, we talked a lot about the fact that if you have strong plants, that makes a healthy plant, makes it much more less susceptible to diseases and pests. Speaking about common vegetable diseases, here are some that we see here in the center part of North Carolina. Blossom end rot is a very common problem. It's a lack of calcium in the soil and uptake by the plant. Or plants can grow very rapidly, and particularly if they are heavily fertilized, or there's too much moisture and too little moisture. Remove the affected fruit, that's damaged fruit, and consider doing soil tests to check your calcium levels. There are ways of adding liquid and chemical calcium, organic calcium, into the soil to help in the future for plants like tomatoes and peppers. All of the nightshade family are affected by blossom end rot. Tomato early blight's another way. You see these spots on the leaves with a halo, a yellow halo around it. They will grow in size and are lesions on the leaves. They are in the soil, and a couple of ways that you can do that is put mulch and water at the base of the plant, prevent soil from splashing up when it rains out. Remove some of the lower leaves, and when you have plants that are infected, do not compost them. Get rid of those plants that are affected by blight, so that you're not transferring those blight pests into the soil again. And do use crop rotation. So move your crops from one place to another from year to year, so you don't plant the same family in the same location. Again, I think one of the earlier Ready Garden Grow classes have talked about crop rotation. Other common vegetable diseases, Fusarium and Verticillium wilt. These are very common in tomatoes. These, again, a soil-based fungal disease that affects tomatoes and other types of nightshade plants. Rotate those crops, plant varieties that are resistant. So you'll see tomato plants a lot of times listed as VFN, VF, or VN. That's for Verticillium, Fusarium, and nematodes. So try to find varieties that are resistant to those funguses and diseases and pests, so that you have a stronger plant and that can resist that from a plant. Powdery mildew is another common vegetable disease. You'll see a white or tan powder on leaf surface. These affects a lot of things like cucumbers, squashes, a lot of other types of big leafy plants. You will see those here. Again, another fungal disease in the soil and also in the air. You can use horticultural oils and fungicides, pull up and dispose of the leaf plants that have that. But they're very difficult. Powdery mildew as a fungus is very difficult to control because once you get that on the plant, the fungicides really don't have all that much impact. You have to be very preventative if you have a powdery mildew problem. So we talked about disease. Again, IPM, one of the best methodologies in defense. From a controls, pick plants that are resistant to diseases. Look for tomatoes with VFM. Look at proper watering, do crop rotation, and when you have to use a control like a herbicide or fungicide, use those with care and with limited control. So in this class, we learned about common pest problems, basics of organic gardening, integrated pest management, techniques for managing problems, including weeding, watering, pests, and diseases. We talked a lot about how you can minimize the impact to the garden, and by following an IPM methodology, you can better control the problems that you're going to have in the garden. There are other Ready Garden Grow series, as you talked about early on. This is one of them, but there are additional topics, including cool season extension. That's the next topic in this series. So feel free to look at those sessions. If there are any questions, please reach out to Master Gardeners, either call us or shoot us an email. And here's some additional information. There is a Ready Garden Grow handbook that is available online, as well as the Extension Master Gardener handbook, which is online for free, or there is a purchase copy available, hard copy available. Both of these links are available for you in the community to have. Thank you.